Kubernetes, the orchestra conductor behind massive modern applications. In a modern application, the front end is like the violins, the back end is the cellos, and a payment service can be the trumpets. Each section plays a different part of the melody, but everything must stay synchronized. Without coordination, the violins begin, but some of them start too early. The cellos hesitate, not sure when to join. The trumpets don't know when to enter. The music is there, but the lack of coordination makes everything fail. But then, a conductor steps onto the stage and raises his baton. The notes align, the timing syncs, the orchestra becomes one clear performance. That's what Kubernetes does. It brings coordination and stability to all the moving pieces of a modern application. My name is Diego, I'm a network and systems engineer based in Paris, and I like breaking down tech concepts into simple and visual explanations. This is the part 1 of the Kubernetes series. We are going to see what it is, why it exists, and how it works. And in the part 2, we are going to see how to interact with it. What are the different ways to use Kubernetes? If you want to see more videos like this one, feel free to subscribe, and that's all. Back to the video. To understand what is really Kubernetes, we need to go back in time. In the 90s, applications were running in a single physical server. Simple, but limited because you needed one physical server per application. As applications and users were growing, one physical machine was not enough. In the early 2000s, virtual machines arrived, letting multiple apps share one single physical server. They improved isolation, but they were heavy, slow, and hard to manage at scale. In 2006, the cloud changed everything, letting us create servers anywhere. For example, AWS. But we were still configuring, patching, and maintaining VMs one by one. Then in 2013, containers appeared, lightweight, fast, and perfectly portable. You could now have multiple containers in a single VM. Deploying your application became consistent across physical servers, VMs, and cloud instances. But with containers came a new problem. Now there were thousands of them. How many containers can I put in this server? What happens if one of them crashes? How do we scale up or scale down? Containers solved packing, but they introduced a whole new layer of operational complexity. At that time, engineers were creating a lot of custom scripts to try to solve these problems. But as you can imagine, that was not enough. We needed a system to manage all this automatically. Google had already solved this problem internally with their orchestration system called Borg. So in 2014, they open sourced its core ideas as Kubernetes. The name comes from this Greek word, which means helmsman, pilot, or navigator, and it became the platform that runs and manages containers at any scale. Now you can finally understand why we call it the orchestrator, the maestro, the captain of containers, lord of the containers, the pod father. Okay, I invented some of them, but you get the idea. At its core, Kubernetes works on a simple idea. You declare your desired state and it constantly works to match it. You say, I want 3 replicas of this container, and Kubernetes keeps 3 running. A container dies, Kubernetes replaces it. Traffic spikes, Kubernetes scales. So how it keeps checking the reality against your desired state, and how it reacts when things change. To answer that, we have to open it up and look at its architecture. A Kubernetes cluster is a group of machines working together. These machines are called nodes. They can be physical servers, virtual machines, or cloud instances. There are 2 types of nodes: master nodes, also known as control plane nodes, and worker nodes. Master nodes are the ones making the decisions, and worker nodes, these are the ones running your containers. To understand this easier, let's explore from the bottom, where your app lives, on the worker nodes, and then we move back to the brain of the system. On each worker node, we have pods. A pod is basically a wrapper for containers. Basically, you put your container inside a pod so that it can be managed and speak the Kubernetes language. It is important to know that we can have multiple containers running inside one pod. Next, we have kubelet, the node agent. Thanks to this agent, each worker node can communicate with the whole cluster and follow instructions from the master nodes. Then we have kube-proxy. Kube-proxy handles the networking on the node, doing routing and load balancing to send traffic to the correct pods. And finally, there is a container runtime, like containerd. The runtime is the engine that starts and stops your containers inside the pods. So worker nodes are where the work happens. To understand how they know what to do, Now we need to look at the master nodes, the ones giving the instructions. This is where the brain of the cluster lives. First, the API server. This is the front door of Kubernetes. Every interaction goes through it, whether it is CLI, an UI, or automations like CI/CD. This is the topic we are going to cover more in depth in the part 2 of this series. What are the ways we have to interact with Kubernetes and how they work? But for the moment, let's continue with the architecture. Coming next, we have the scheduler. The scheduler looks at all available worker nodes and decides where each new pod will be placed to run, based on CPU, memory, and other rules. Then we have the controller manager. This one is constantly asking, is the current state equal to the desired state? If not, it takes action, like creating missing pods or replacing failed ones. Finally, we have etcd. etcd is the distributed database for Kubernetes. It stores the full state of the cluster, including nodes, pods, configs, and the desired state. It is critical for disaster recovery, because restoring etcd lets you basically restore the brain of your cluster. Now that we have met the main characters, let us see how they work together when you deploy something new. Let's say you send a configuration to the API server. The API server stores it in etcd, and the controller manager compares the desired state with the actual state. If new pods are needed, the scheduler picks which worker nodes should run them. The kubelet on each worker node receives the plan and asks the container runtime to start those containers. And kube-proxy makes sure network traffic can reach those pods. And that's it. Your pods are running. So now you know the architecture. All of this works together so that Kubernetes can keep the cluster in your desired state. And I know it's a lot of information, but don't worry, you won't deal with that. That's just the way Kubernetes works. It is important to understand it, but at the end of the day, that's its job, not yours. Your job is to learn how to define the desired state, so that Kubernetes can make it real. And that's what we are going to learn in the part 2 of this series. In the next part, we will focus on how you actually interact with Kubernetes. We will look at YAML manifests, deployments, services, and how tools like kubectl, Argo CD, and Helm talk to the Kubernetes API server. If this video helped you to understand Kubernetes better, give me some feedback in the comments. I will appreciate it. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.